Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on the sonnets, and today we've got sonnet number 32, which goes, "If thou survive my well-contented day, when that churl death my bones with dust shall cover, and shall by fortune once more resurvey these poor rude lines of thy deceased lover, compare them with the bettering of the time, and though they be outstripped by every pen, reserve them for my love, not for their rhyme, exceeded by the height of happier men. Oh, then vouchsafe me but this loving thought. Had my friend's muse grown with this growing age, a dearer birth than this his love had brought to march in ranks of better equipage. But since he died, and poets better prove, theirs for their style I'll read, his for his love." So this is one, again, talking about immortalizing the fair youth in poetry, but also bringing in those elements of self-doubt that we've seen from Shakespeare in his previous mentions of his poetry, saying that his poetry isn't worthy and that nobody, even though it's going to immortalize the fair youth, it doesn't quite capture the fair youth as appropriately as it should. Here he's playing down his own skill at writing poetry, or doubting his own skill at writing poetry, and saying, look, if you live longer than I do and someday you happen to find these poems, basically I hope that you don't find them cringeworthy, or if you do find them cringeworthy in comparison to the poetry of that time when you happen to reread these, I hope that you'll take into consideration the fact that had I lived longer, I could have developed my skills as a poet better and been able to write better poems about you. So, like, read other people's poems because they're really well written, but read mine because I love you, and they're about you, and they're for you, and I'm passionate about you, and I'm in love with you, and I want to immortalize you in the poems, is what this one is basically all about. And it's a fairly straightforward sonnet, unlike the one from yesterday. There is one little thing that I want to bring up, though, and it has to do with the rhyme scheme in it, which in this particular sonnet seems to be pretty regular, except you have growing age rhymed with equipage, and you have prove rhymed with love, which, the way that I'm saying them in a fairly bland American accent, those words don't really rhyme with each other. But there have been scholars who have studied Shakespeare's sonnets and Shakespeare's plays that tend to have a lot of rhymes in them, like Midsummer Night's Dream or Much Ado, the plays like that, and they've looked at the vowel sounds in those words that on paper look like maybe they should rhyme, like prove and love. They both end in OVE, but tried to figure out what the vowel sound would be in order to make those rhyme. And based on what those vowel sounds of these not quite rhyming today words would be, they developed what they call original pronunciation, which is trying to mimic the accent or recreate the accent that existed in England when Shakespeare wrote these plays. And it's some pretty interesting stuff. I personally am not good at original pronunciation. There's a couple really cool YouTube videos about it. If you just do a search for them, you'll find it. And to me, it sounds a little bit like an Ohio accent mixed with a smidge of something British. But it's interesting, I think. And then it also makes it interesting to me when I have spoken to actors in the past who are like, oh, I can't do Shakespeare because I can't do the accent. Like, well, I know that we often see Shakespeare done with British accents because there's a lot of British actors that do it, but that's not even the accent that it was originally done in, and so many of the plays were based in Italy or in Spain or some fantasy land that could be wherever it is that you want it to be. So anyway, please don't ever think that you can't do Shakespeare because you can't do a British accent, because Shakespeare didn't even do Shakespeare in a British accent. He did it in an accent that made prove and love rhyme with each other. Anyway, that's my little rhyme scheme original pronunciation lesson for today. But seriously, go check out those other videos because it is pretty cool to hear what that might have sounded like. And Sonnet 32, a pretty simple, I'm having loads of self-doubt, but please hang on to my poetry, even if much better poetry comes along in the future, and read mine just knowing that I love you. So I love you, my viewers, and I will see you tomorrow for Sonnet 33. Mwah.